Hey guys, this is Mike
Dylan,
from the ARG team coming at you after GP
after hours.
after hours. It's after dark. It's not after dark. Coming at you right after the GP Minneapolis. This is probably gonna be going up a little bit later, but this is while the whole tournament's fresh in our minds. I was at my locals watching the live stream on Sunday, just cheering on the IU player that was going to try and beat Ryan, but I knew exactly what was
He
happening.
broke the curse. He broke the
He
curse.
did. He finally beat IU on stream. All he had to do was play a deck that has like a gross
A,
win rate
a
over
good
Ryan's.
IU matchup. And it isn't just like a swarm deck.
Yep. So, how'd you enjoy it, Dylan? How'd you enjoy everything about the tournament?
It was pretty entertaining. The earlier streams were not as good quality. I just watched Chimimi play a throwaway their match against ISIS. So that was fun. But other than that,
Yeah,
it
I
seemed
saw that
like,
play too.
yeah, that was pretty brutal. But
The
it seemed like the
conflagration
Lawrence
was on a very
Disciples were,
the conflagration was on a really weird board. I didn't agree with the timing on it,
yeah.
but you never whatever the players think at the moment
I don't
happens.
really know what Ultra Dragon Shooting Star does in this format, and it was a really weird sideboard choice, but evidently it worked because he misplayed really hard, so.
Yep. Hey, you know what?
Sometimes you just need to anticipate them taking the wrong play, so.
You know what? Shooting Star hits Mosasaurus as it comes in, so I guess that's a play. If you can get it out before
It just
turn.
kills the Moza. Done.
And you still have -3 stones.
But there were some interesting lists. It was interesting to see that the Chimimi lists were more or less what Ryan played at Worlds, like very close.
Yeah.
A couple of them deviated, and like I didn't see anything similar to the list that was played in Italy, but I saw a lot of them that were very close to Ryan's. Like they ran boomerangs, they ran a whole bunch of stuff that Ryan was playing almost to the letter.
And
I'm
Ryan's
just gonna
list
pull up
from
a list right now.
Worlds is just trash. So I don't know how people are doing well
Hey,
with that.
the only thing that I can really see different is they dropped out the Toad and the Toad Rider,
Yeah, the
which makes
Jiraiya
sense because
packages.
honestly, I play tested with it a lot, and the Toad Rider is awesome, but he's just so heavy, and it takes a lot of time to
Yeah,
get him out. And then by that point, you should have already won, right? So,
exactly. You have to play a lot of like
but
really cheap runes too, and if
it
you're playing a
looks
lot
like
of
they
cheap runes,
basically just swapped it for a couple more spells like Elemental Blast and Ruin Story.
Elemental Blast is my idea. I will take full credit for that. I was the first community deck to
Sure,
pilot that
sure.
at Worlds. That puts it on
Other than that,
kills,
I'm not
kills
actually
Disciple.
that surprised that IU got so far.
Yeah, in like a somewhat unsolved metagame, I
Well,
just got
I
to
always say you just gotta respect IU, right? Because IU is the one who takes advantage of you not anticipating her every single GP that she is not expected. So,
Yep, exactly. So everybody should
I
be
mean,
going in
how
expecting to
many
face
IU
more.
players were even there?
I've got the ruler breakdown because I'm prepared. 7.
And well, you know, you might as well go through the whole breakdown because I'm sure people are kind of curious if they haven't actually seen a written breakdown. And just for the purpose of discussion, it's nice to see the numbers written out.
Exactly, yeah. We should be showing it to the side, but it was 13 times Spinning Witch, which obviously people were very expectant of that. 12 Keurig, which was very interesting.
Yeah, it's a lot of Kirik.
9 Brunhild, 9 Lucifer. 8 Chimimi and 8 Gil. 7 IU, 6 Isis. 5
That was
Ambo,
also pretty surprising.
I know. 3 Loki and 3 Tigris. 2 Scarlet, 1 CL, 1 Freyla, 1 Hanzo, and then my image cut off there. So,
Well,
I
that's a
think the
pretty
other ones
big
were like,
split in diversity, I think, in my opinion.
yeah,
It's interesting to hear so many Gil players because we kind of discussed this as a group, but just in general, Gil is a very skill-intensive deck. It takes a lot of practice, and
Gil
there's a
is
lot of.
definitely one of the hardest decks to pilot properly. It's really tough.
And as we learned from the stream, it's really easy to pick the wrong line of play, and a lot of the times, a win and a loss just comes down to the one time you made the wrong decision, and that came down to the wrong line. Because then, from anywhere you go, there's no correct line to play. And with Gil, you have this ridiculous decision tree where there's like thousands of choices you can make in the scheme of the game, and any one of those could be the incorrect choice that ends up losing you the game. So I
Exactly.
think a lot of people learn that, and it kind of shows because even though Gil is still, in my opinion, like the best deck, it's not easy at all to pilot, and it's really easy to not play it correctly.
Yep. Another big thing about Gil is the fact that there are so many variations to how the deck is built. A lot of people still
A
do
lot.
like the absolute awareness into the one water stone for the spinning Aquasoul, but the people who don't do that still do well if they like try their own tech choices in there and just kind of play around with it. I know one of my friends is using like Disciples and Black Tears in the main from there because it's just like there's so much extra advantage you get from that. You're recycling Lorites, Disciples are really good, the Black Tears makes your Chimimi matchup so much easier. It's just like there's a lot of just kind of like little tiny bits of information that can be adjusted to make the deck as optimal as possible.
And I think the kind of takeaway, and I know Ryan went into this a bit in his video when he talked about when he was interviewed by Jeremy right afterward, but it basically became green is still a thing. It's not necessarily the focusing point of the game anymore. Some form of green in your deck for Lorites, fairy spells, or just a lot of interactive cards are green. As Time Spinning Witch kind of proved, a lot of the cards are blue as well, but we're seeing still a lot of the green cards are actually what were the defining features of the decks that we're winning. Chimimi is a pretty obvious one because mono green, so there's not really a whole lot of not green going on there, but Time Spinning Witch just throw some green in there. Gil, even though a lot of the power cards aren't in green, it's a green base because Gil himself. There's just a lot of solid green cards, and the biggest thing we saw a lot of was the Lorite engine with the 4 of Lorite Disciples and the 4 Lorite. And there's a lot of cards that enable that within green to be a very powerful engine. The most commonly used, obviously, based on runes, were the meditation, because you can actually pick up. Yeah, well, the picking up from the grave is actually super solid in playtesting. Like, if you lost your Lorite and you need your Lorite back, you can get the free draws, and instead of just getting a third draw, you can go for the Lorite back. Or a Lorite Disciple, and then you have that play set up for you. Really yeah, it's insane. Like, it just Disciple does so much work getting first strike, drain, barrier, swiftness, +2/+2. It's just incredible, and the fact that you can recycle that and do it again, or have just like another one as a top deck and another one and another one and another one is just it's crazy. Another
one. I need to check if the 7 Disciples, what his race is. I think he's...
I believe it's Wizard, but I could be wrong.
Let me double check that, because I'm actually looking at the list right now. Yep, just Wizard.
Yeah, I remember.
I'm not sure why, but 2 of the Chimimi
because Force of Will loves the Wizard race and will eventually get that ruler that supports them, okay?
Yeah. But I'm looking at these lists, and there were 2 Chimimis in the top 8 that were playing the Saintly Elvenstone.
I honestly, and from playtesting, because I talked about this a lot, and then I looked at some of the Italy lists, and they ran it too. I think it's just for Lorite, because it lets you survive Sandstorm without investing any cards. And I saw it a lot in the feature matches. The Sandstorm was pretty critical because, again, going back to that game where the one line of play just snowballed him out of the game, it's because the next turn he used Sandstorm to kill McKay and Lorite, so he cleared off the board so that he couldn't use Lorite's Disciple and get all 4 modes. And there was no longer a McKay, so even if he drew a Lorite, so it just, like, just one turn alone was enough to clear the whole game away for him. And if he would have had like a Saintly Elvenstone up, he could have like saved a Lorite perhaps or anything like that. Like saving the Lorite basically in my playtesting, because I was going to go, but a lot of stuff came up with work that I couldn't.
Yeah.
But that was like from playtesting, that's what I saw. I was like, wow, this stone does a lot for literally 1 mana for 1 creature. It's just, the Lorite makes such a big deal to keep it on the board just because of the Disciples.
I love how you assume that Lorite 7 Disciples has 4 effects instead of 7, but that's okay.
It's, you know. The barrier doesn't actually come up as often as it could, but it's still obviously a really useful effect.
Yeah. Another big thing that the Lorite 7 Disciples catered towards was actually a very mid-range kind of playstyle for the deck, because getting Drain in the mid-game is just...
Drain is really good against the aggro decks, but the biggest thing is Swiftness with 2/2, because that gives your deck burst damage, and Chimimi is not, other than flipping itself to give a buff, or the Elephants, it's not really known for burst damage. It's a really good mid-range deck, but the Disciples extend that like a lot more.
And of course, a lot of people playing obviously the Yokai Festival. Most people are only playing the 100-eyed one in the main board instead of the...
Well, the 100-eyed one does a really good job of ensuring damage, because not only does it give you 2 6/6 bodies, but it also stops 2 blockers. And that's really important, because when you have a big board of creatures, like let's say elephants, for example, and you need to secure the win, it's a lot easier to do that when they have no blockers.
That's fair, yeah.
And obviously, as a deck where you're swarming the board, a zoo deck, as you will, having more bodies on the board is good. And doing that as cheaply as possible, which I believe, if I'm correct, the pickle, as you would call it, is actually the cheapest yokai that you can put into play. That's actually worth anything. Looks like a pickle.
It does look like a pickle.
Yeah.
It's a pickle with a bunch of eyes.
But I can't think of any yokais that cost less than 2.
Because there are none.
Yeah, so okay, I wasn't just forgetting it. Yeah, he's the cheap. Yeah, they could always do that in future sets, but I think Yokai Festival actually has a good range because there's, I think, a 3-drop, and there's the Tengu as well.
Oh,
if you want to go, if you want to go on the high range, like it's got a lot of utility. I don't really think they need more Tengus per se, but it's a good card. It gets a lot of value. I noticed the Italy list wasn't playing it. But I could understand because it takes main word space.
A lot of people that were playing Karura at all in their Chimimi decks were siding it, which makes sense because it's like if you're facing something that isn't green and you do.
I don't really like it in Chimimi because it's assuming you have 5 mana up. Like it's really good in decks like Gil and stuff like that where you're playing very reactively. But Chimimi, like we were kind of discussing, is like a mid-range deck. It's got a lot of early game presence, and then it's trying to finish thing before you go late. And to me, the Tengu is a very late game.
Yeah.
It's not great for establishing boards. It's good for just pushing through and doing the last bit of damage you need, or just being like a powerhouse.
Yeah. The one thing I will argue with you about, of course, because we enjoy arguing as much as possible.
Oh yeah.
Is the fact that I think that the main things you said Karura and against are like your Brunhild and Lucifer matchups. Like once they run you out of resources, say like turn 5 they answer the elephants, there's like, alright, turn 6, Yokai Festival into 2 12/12 flyers.
Yeah.
Deal with it.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. And a lot of times you'd see they just wouldn't use the elephants, and it's like, why? It's like, well, because the elephants is your trump card. You don't need to use it immediately. Your deck has a really, really good job of, for example, discard. Well, between the Spirit Stones, the Meditation, and all these other draw engines you have, it's very, very hard for them to get rid of all your cards, and it's very hard for them to do that while keeping up with your board presence, because you can just throw the cards away onto your board and then immediately replace them. And it's very hard for the dark decks to keep up with that. Yep. Brunhild has a little bit of a different story because they have an entire board wipe, but it's still hard for them to keep up with your card advantage.
And also, any kind of stone inconsistency makes that deck really hard to pilot throughout in like a 9.
Yeah. Well, the big thing about Brunhild is it's never run as far as I can see from the topping decks. They don't seem to be run as a yellow deck. They're always focused on different color with yellow as a fallback. So it makes it kind of hard for them to see mana consistency in comparison to like a mono green deck, for example.
Exactly, yeah. Because a lot of the time, some of the big consistencies in Brunhild come from the fact that Patchwork Frankenstein into Spear is like crazy good.
Oh yeah, that's a pretty good combo.
It's spice. It's serious spice. But
even Ryan's deck, you could see he hit the Speaking Stone like quite a lot, and it almost messed him up a few times. But luckily, the Chimie player had no 1 or 2 drops that he was willing to play, so obviously it didn't mess him up. But that very easily could have turned into a very messy situation.
It could have, but also don't forget that Time Spinning Witch also just mana fixes for everything and everything possible. So.
Kind of. Like, time was definitely the big thing there from Blue. He didn't have time mana, and he needs to use the time to do color fixing, which obviously means he can't use the time mana as time mana when he's using the Time Spinning Witch's ability. Yeah. So it kind of goes both ways.
As long as he sees an idle turn 1, he's fine. That was the big thing with that deck. Turn 1... So, I think we're going to just use this as a transition, because I'm sure a lot of people want to know why, out of 13 TSW players, only 1 made it to top 8 and took the whole thing. So... that's really important to go over, and I think some of Dryan's choices were A, running Idol of Magic into Beyond the Threshold of Time for a turn 2 Gretel, which is always insane.
Gretel.
Big
no body, but draws you a card is really a big deal because ramp normally takes cards out of your hand, right? So.
And also when you pop the Idol of Magic, it also replaces itself. So basically you're netting like so much advantage for using such little resource.
I didn't take a look at really too many Time Spinning Witch decks, but I really like the addition of the 2-mana idol that just taps and costs a void to make any color.
Absolutely.
Well, because it gives you perfect mana, right? So it takes a 1-turn investment and replaces itself on play, and then immediately gives you perfect mana in exchange for the Time Spinning Witch's ability that turn might do. But that's essentially turning a ruler into a free mana dork.
Exactly, and Going past that, of course, we know that that's a really good choice to add to the Time Speed Witch. Mana consistency is crazy good in this format. And
It's
then,
ridiculously underrated in my opinion.
yep, which is why I think TSW is just in such a good spot to be dominating these tournaments, because your consistency is going to be so much higher than everyone else. Plus, you have Distortion of Time and Mosasaurus on top of it, so they don't get to use the mana that they're not.
I feel like a lot of people just didn't understand that using time distortion means you're skipping the recovery, so the Moza then rests the stone for a second turn, essentially. So doing Moza in the same turn as time distortion locked your opponent out of 3 stones for 2 turns, as well as in cases like IU, it meant the ruler was stuck tapped.
Yep.
So there's an entire turn where they're not making mana and they're not flipping the ruler.
And that was actually how Ryan took the last game that he had. The person had to tap
it was a slaughter. Like the IU player did not even get to declare an attack, and Ryan had like agonies and stuff if he did, but it just didn't get that far. He just never had the chance to try and attack him, right?
Exactly. Just
I think the blue leaf attacking was the most damage he got
IU
through.
has an awful matchup against TSW. Like, it's abysmally low. I think that if Ryan had faced Chimimi, he would have definitely had a bigger challenge going into his finals, but just the way it panned out,
he got really lucky in the 4, I think, because he even said that he was scared of Chimimi because it's his bad matchup. But the fact that he didn't open with anything reasonable in his first game was like a really big nail in the coffin. And then even if they go into time, which I think they did, it's hard to beat Time Spinning Witch in a timely fashion, even as a very quick deck.
Exactly.
And the thing about IU is, since you're running one of everything, it's hard to have the perfect answers when you only have one of everything, right?
Right. You can't have a Lorite for every Distortion of Time.
Because you only got the one Lorite.
Yeah. Going into what I think was the really big clincher that he was talking about this to us in chat, obviously, going over everything. He was kind of scared of the Gil matchup, same way most TSW players will be. Lorite Factory hurts. But Ryan was playing
it's pretty disgusting.
Ryan was playing 2 Koga, the Secret Village, which was...
I've always been I was making a big deal about how good additions are in this format.
Yeah.
Like, Koga gets a little bit more hype than it should, even though no one's really playing it, because it's like, oh, it's Lumia's ability. Well,
it's expensive Lumia.
It is. It's an expensive Lumia because it takes 2 turns of investment to remove the guy and then put it back into play, and overall it takes 3 mana. But the ability to save your Moza and then throw it back into play when they're trying to kill it, because it's a really huge body with 15 attack, right?
Yep.
And the IU player kind of discovered that they had to block the Moza with their face. But
yep. Another big thing that people forget about Koga is the fact that you can use the time mana to pay for the activate ability to remove the thing.
Yep.
That's huge. That's like such a massive play that you get off of that at instant speed, just like easy.
And something that Ryan was making a lot of good use of was using the distortion of time immediately in his recovery phase.
Yeah.
So that leaves all of your turn up to play whatever you want, and then if you do anything to respond, well, that's great. You don't have a recovery, so you tapped your mana for literally no reason. Right. So it's got a win-win. You either they don't do anything to counter your play, in which case you're probably winning, or they do, but they're immediately punished for it by not having the mana available next turn. And that way you can take advantage of them playing conservatively and not actually tapping their stones. Because that's a lot of what he was seeing was they were just very conservative. They were very mindful of the fact he can skip the recovery, but he didn't give them a choice.
Exactly. He just made sure that any time that he used it was just like a power play. The big thing with Time Spinning Witch is that if you can find the right spot to use the Distortion of Time to really trip them up, you can just completely snowball the game.
And I think it was a really good meta call because, like we just said, it's a very skill-intensive deck for Gil, and a lot of people just weren't comfortable bringing it.
Yep.
And even the people who did, just they said that they kind of underestimated how much skill it took to play. They didn't really practice as much as they should have. They didn't really understand how many different lines of play are available in every game and how many different deck building choices you can have going in, right?
I think you just exactly quoted Billy Buttons. Poor guy didn't know that he was...
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, I think I did quote Billy. Yeah. Poor Billy. Oh my god. He just picked the wrong meta deck to bring, that's for sure.
Good news, though, is that we got him on stream.
Yeah, no, that was awesome. I love seeing Billy on stream.
Same here.
He's such a positive guy.
He's an entertainer. He's a very, very entertaining boy. What was the last choice? Oh! Last thing to think about for the Time Spinning Witch deck that Ryan brought. His side deck was pretty standard, I think.
I didn't really take a good look at it. Like, I know he had the agonies in there, and obviously those are for a very specific purpose. He was just trying to respect IU. You got Agony, Rachel, It's an interesting choice for sideboard, but I can see why. It's just to get specific combo pieces
And
out, or specific
Koga works
pieces in
with it
general.
too.
Sorry?
Koga works with it too, like the Koga
Oh
racing
yeah,
combo.
but like I said, it's taking your body off the board, and he's got lots of really good Koga targets,
Exactly.
especially the Mosa.
Moses the big one.
One and Only is definitely a pretty interesting one, as well as the Spirit Stone.
I like the idea behind the one and only, just because if you're facing Ayu, it's another out to the elephants too, which is really nice. Spirit Stone's probably just for when he started siding into heavier green stuff, like the Rachel.
I think if I recall what he said, it's just whenever he isn't using Ruin Stories or anything like that, he would just side out of the green-black into a straight extra stone. I would draw him a card later.
Interesting. Definitely interesting.
Which makes a lot of sense, because the Spirit Stone is actually just a basic green if you're not playing any story cards, right?
He wasn't playing Ruin Story at all.
Was it Ruin Story or Black Tears that he was playing? He was playing something that was a story card,
Black
I
Tears
believe.
inside, yeah.
Okay, that was it, yeah. So if he doesn't actually end up using the Black Tears, I believe he sided into the Spirit Stone.
That's interesting.
It also was, I'm making assumptions here. I'm assuming it was also for mirror matches, because you can't Mosa the Spirit Stone. And that actually came up a lot, because a lot of times the Chimini players would get like 3 Spirit Stones, or not Spirit Stones, sorry.
Speaking Stones. Yeah.
Speaking Stone, yeah, sorry. Anyway, you can't Mosa the Speaking Stone. So it came up a lot where they would get like 3 Speaking Stones as their first stones. And it's like, well, I guess I'm not playing Mosa because I don't want to lock my own stones or bounce your guy. Or is it rest a guy for Mosa?
Mosa is kill a rested guy.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm taking a hook, I guess. But
I know. Everybody thinks of hook. I had to correct so many people the other day.
But I think that's the other reason he ran in the main, was because if he runs into Time Spinning Witch Mirror, they can't use the Mosa on the Speaking Stone.
2 more things I definitely wanted to go over with this list. I think the last thing that really made it unique compared to everything else, the addition of 3 Viola and 3 Lord Seven Disciples.
I think that's more from his Chimimi playing. Like, he experienced that Viola is really good in this format because quick cast buff, 6/6 body, can give things flying, and it hilariously came into play when he was doing a kind of a battle or attack for game, and someone blocked with a Viola, and then he arrow trapped, and they cast another Viola. Well, it's like, well, now instead of it's 1,200 points of damage now, right? So he actually like did more damage by protecting a Viola.
Yeah.
But that's a really good combo. Obviously, you'd want to use against your opponent rather than against yourself. But it's a really devastating combo to deal 12 to their blocker, right?
And another big thing is that hitting the Mosa with the flying, just turning it into a 17-12 flyer.
Yeah, well, the flying is a really great way to finish the game, right? Because they don't really expect Mosa to be flying at you, so...
Exactly, and the 1,700 damage is actually really relevant, because 315s will kill, but if you're using, say, like a 17, a 15, and then like a boosted Lord 7 Disciples for 9, that's really good math up to that 4,100 mark.
And in the worst case, it's an extra 6/6 quick cast that you can do at the end of your opponent's turn. Because Ryan was making a very good point of using his mana at any point he could.
Yep.
He never tapped out unnecessarily or anything, but he always made sure he got the absolute most value for his mana wherever possible.
Exactly.
And that's I think where we really saw the skill increase between having an experienced player like him versus just anyone else, because he was like really making sure to leverage everything he could.
The Viola was also a really good call against the mirror match. Being pull out Distortion of Time is just fantastic if it's not your opponent's turn, because they can't do it in response on your turn. They can only do it during theirs. So, definitely good.
Yeah, really solid gameplay. I was really happy I took the time to watch that, because it's very impressive.
Yeah, it was a very good
I
match.
was definitely surprised that Keurig made it all the way to the top 4, though.
Yeah, I do want to talk about that list, because a lot of people have just been talking about, oh yeah, Black Red Keurig is the way to go. Play the Null Magic Stones, and then we look at Joey Schilling's list, and there are Null Magic Stones in the side, and it's a mono red.
That's a really weird
board.
side choice, but I can see why, because as I don't remember who said it, but America loves their aggro. It might have been even Ryan, but it's a good choice if you're going to see a lot of aggro mirrors, because while everyone else is eating their own life to play fire cards on their first turn, you're not doing that, so you're obviously going to win the aggro matchup, because you're not taking aggro damage and you're dealing aggro damage. Or, sorry, you're not taking pain damage from your stones, but you're dealing the same output more or less.
Exactly. So we definitely see a lot of that. A couple of really cool tech choices. He played a lot of battle arts, like a huge amount of them.
Yeah, he's even playing Power Spike, interesting enough. So
I love Power Spike. I still think the card's fantastic.
No, no. Well, he's only playing as a one up, so I don't think he really thought it was that fantastic either.
Hey,
But
if you grab it, you grab it. Whatever.
the four pathway part was pretty good too.
Yep. So yeah, it's a total of
Interestingly, only the two Freyla.
14 battle arts. Two Freyla makes sense though because you really only want to combo it with like whole pig squadron, just to get the piggy out of it after it dies, which is nice. It's also just general burst damage. Also, I lied about the amount of battle arts. It's actually 18, counting the ground nurse supremacy.
Jeez. All right. Wow.
So he was all in.
To be fair, I've definitely seen people who have 18 battle arts and still whiff off the. And that always sucks. That always sucks.
It's Keurig support tribal. So.
And it makes sense that he's siding the Majin because without the Nullstone, there's not really any sense of having that in the deck.
Yep. The sideboard actually makes a lot of sense here. The four Null Darkness into the Majins and Rays are really good. Ray's fantastic against like any kind of mid-range or control matchup. Big deal that I actually wanted to make a mention of, something that I had talked about initially when this card was revealed. Magic Stone the Hermit plus Shooting Star is another 1,000 burst damage.
Oh yeah, because you can give it the swiftness from it. I don't know. I really like Shooting Star Dragon in general, but I just don't really see, other than the swiftness, what he really adds to the format in general. Like again, I saw the guy side into the Shooting Star, and I was like, I can see how this would be really good in like a dark matchup, but even then, it's really hard to commit the Shooting Star to the board without a Ruined Story or something like that coming along, and getting around the fact that he has barrier.
Yeah, it's a bit of a problem. It's better if you're like swarming a little bit and you get the Shooting Star out for that extra burst.
And I think, I guess it is kind of smart because there's not really much yellow, and so Miscalc isn't as big of a problem as it was last format.
Which is actually a really good call. I think the card sees its merits, but I think you really have to like know your matchups where it's good.
It's definitely a big investment having to lose the extra card if it dies, so you definitely need to pick your battles when you're playing Shooting Star.
If you have a Piggy already on board, it's really good though, because it also is just like...
I think we've kind of understood that, like looking at the aggro list, that Piggy does a lot of work, and even decks that aren't Keurig can just throw Dragonors in there and get the Piggy value. So I mean, yeah, that's the other thing I guess, other than the Laureate engine, is the Piggy engine, I guess, where it's you're on the 4 or Dragonors and the 4 Piggies. Like he does a good job. He hits face. He has flying. It's flying pigs.
It's flying pigs. That's literally the deck. It's just it's a deck that's literally just 18 flying pigs plus support.
And I think the IU list was actually kind of interesting as well.
I didn't really get to look too hard at it. It looked very similar to the one that was piloted at Worlds, but I feel like...
I'm pretty sure someone was saying it is the list that was piloted at Worlds, like to a T, but I'm not actually sure. I haven't confirmed by looking at the list of Worlds.
I'll tell you if it's the same one.
But looking at it just cursorily, very quickly right now, it does actually look like it is very, very similar to the Worlds list.
Yeah, I'm not seeing the white leaf. I think he's elected for the blue leaf over the white leaf, but I think other than that, I think it's exactly the same list.
Yeah. It's didn't he play White Leaf in the actual event? I swear I saw it, but
I think he sided it. It might have been the other IU player that was using the White Leaf. Let me check.
Yeah, I don't actually remember too well, so that might just be me.
Nope. This shows what I should do, having these things in order. What's this one? This one did have the White Leaf in main. Yes.
Okay.
I think the Tuma IU list was exactly the same, but who's the other one who played IU? God.
The other thing that actually seemed like, I mean, it's not a huge deal, but just looking at the IU list, it just really reminds you of like how many different threats they have. Even though they only have one of each, they have such a huge diversity. Like, for example, the Thought Control is a really big one because it lets them see what you have prepared for you. Lightning Cave's another big one because it stops you having flyers from blocking IU or swiftness characters to aggro you down. I'm trying to think, what was the blue card that returns a 3-cost or less to the hand, and if you use time it, that's really solid as IU because 3 costs are basically the only thing you'll really be seeing as IU, as long as you're doing well.
Another big thing was the fact that Time Dilation is able to rest J Resonator. Being able to just target rest something and then swing after drawing 2 cards that might be another soul is like potential burst damage on top of damage creation and assurance, which is nuts when you think about it.
Yeah, the Coral Stone was interesting. I mean, you may as well play it since you're not really going to play any other
The
special
Coral Stone had
stones.
a
But
really big impact, actually.
yeah, well, because it makes it rain, which means you can make a thunderstorm, right?
Well, first of all, it makes it so that cleansing rain, instead of bouncing something to hand, spins it to the top of the deck. So that's already a really good use. And then from there, you use Lightning Cave to make it Thunderstorm, and then Thunder Wave becomes a bounce something, draw two.
I'm definitely interested in the Magic Stone of Hope because it didn't seem like it really worked out for him too well in the stream. But I'm sure
Yeah.
having the access to the shoot resuscitating will
Resuscitating Will
was
actually-
basically what the goal was, right?
Yeah. Resuscitating Will and Life Stealing Altar. Both of those are the big reasons for the Hope being in there. And then on top of that, you add in Winds of Gold. Winds.
Yeah,
Wings of Gold.
Wings of Gold is really, really solid because a lot of the times they're just depending on being able to target you with an agony or resting your ruler or what have you. So having that before untap is like insane. Like it's crazy.
Yeah.
There's very little they can do at that point, right?
Yep, exactly. And it normally locks down games pretty easily, especially if they didn't put especially if they put like full mana investment into leaving one up for the Scarlet's Agony.
Yep, it's really a big card. Magic Sweets isn't around, unfortunately, so you can't double up on that kind of protection. But
Unfortunately.
At the same time, I don't really envy any IU player because you're a lot more like we were talking about how many lines of play Gil has. I feel like IU has a lot less lines of play, and there's so much more critical on which ones you pick because they make a huge difference, but you have such a little like amount of choices, but they make a big deal. So I don't envy the guy who has to go through 8 or 9 rounds of Swiss trying to not die with IU. So
the big thing about IU is that she's very linear right now in New Frontiers.
I'd argue she's kind of linear in general, more so because of the concentration on the resuscitating will.
Yeah.
But you're right, more so in New Frontiers because your card pool is that much smaller right now, right?
Exactly. In Wanderer, you get a little bit extra room. So we definitely see that a lot of the lists are kind of like keeping the same like package that's been there since last 4 months of New Frontiers, but then just kind of mixing around the threats and trying to make it so that less than IU having access to spreading Flame Horse in the OTK right away, you want to be able to just like protect yourself and protect the IU while setting up this full play. It's a lot of hand sculpting, which I think is one of the big reasons that IU still maintains her ability as a skill cap ruler despite being very linear.
Yeah, like I said, it's not easy. You have few choices, but the choices you make such a huge deal because you only get a couple turns of use, and a lot of times your choice is really what am I going to do with the mana I have? Because you do have 4 perfect stones, but a lot of the time you don't open with the perfect mana. So like, do I flip on 2 blue? Am I going to be able to do anything with that? Probably not. But if I stay and tap an extra stone, am I going to lose because I'm not going quick enough now? Are they going to have answers for me? So there's just so much small micromanagement of decisions. And it's not something I'd want to do for a really long event, that's for sure. Because at locals is a different story, but
that's exactly what we saw with I believe his name was Caleb Tuma. I think was the one who got second place. We saw him open like Time Stone, Shoal.
Yeah, and then the second game I think he opened Time Stone and then the Will of Hope or the Hope Stone.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well, not super optimal. At least you can use it though, right? Whereas if you don't open yellow, you lose Resuscitating Will, which is your win condition. So,
and the only problem there was that even if you had something like Lorite or like even something to remove things from the grave, you're stuck in yellow and blue. You can't Lorite the Distortion of Time. So
and that's not a matchup you want to take longer because yeah, the time spinning, which is not a matchup you have the choice of taking longer periods of time. You just have to go as quickly as you can before they screw you. So.
Exactly, and Ryan immediately capitalized off of that. I think that was the fastest I've ever seen somebody burn through 2 Distortion of Times just because his opponent couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah, it was pretty disappointing. Not because anyone played badly, but just how easy it was for Ryan to steal that.
Knowing how bad IU's matchup normally is against Time Spinning Witch that distortions you twice.
Yeah, it was like you said, if it was a Chimi matchup and he didn't have that much available to him. But I think that's the biggest thing about a diverse meta is that it's very hard for you to predict what people are going to be playing against you. And especially as a control deck, and that's why it's very impressive that he got this far. It's very hard to predict what you're going to see. But I think he made the correct prediction that there wouldn't be very many Gil, or at least he wouldn't see them because it's difficult for them to pilot, so there won't be as many of them.
Right.
And that kind of decision making is it's really hard to do, but it's definitely pretty important because not necessarily how many of each deck you're going to see, but how many, or at the tournament, but how many you're going to see. Because if you're winning, you're not going to see decks that are losing, and vice versa, right? So that's another hard part of deck construction. A lot of people don't think of it.
Because now people know how good Time Spinning Witch is. People are going to be piloting a lot, which means that we're going to see more stuff like Chimimi and maybe Gil teching against it. And then once we see that, people are going to start building decks that ignore Time Spinning Witch, but maximizing their matchup against green. So then
Yeah,
you might.
I still don't think we're like everyone's gonna say like, oh, okay, Time Spinning Witch is the best deck now, blah blah blah. Well, I don't think we're actually at the point where we have a solid meta. We don't know what's actually the best. It just in this one tournament, this one thing was good, and because of that, this made this thing good, this made this thing bad, and blah blah blah. Like it
The
just
meta is
cycles and
very
feeds
much,
on itself.
I've been talking about this a lot. The meta is still very much unsolved. Where it's like people are still trying to figure out what the best deck is. Ryan's still claiming that Witch is tier 0, but if you just happen to face like your Chimimi and Gil matchups over and over again, if they have the right tech choices against you, your matchup is very, very difficult. Basically, we're just going to see players evolve further and further. I think that knowing the fact that there's so many high skill cap decks that are in such a diverse metagame, and there's so many of them that are available in like the top circles, is crazy. And I think because of that, people are just going to be experimenting more and more with that going forward, and I think that's really good for the game.
Oh, absolutely. That's kind of the best thing about I think Grim format was that there were always these random decks coming along, and so many like insignificant ones like Abdul was a big one, and then you see a lot of Sherazade decks come up, and then you see the Grim Aggro come up, and there's like Pandora Discard, and there's all these small decks that are like, oh, this was an idea I had, and it came up, and it worked, and it was great, and there's lots of room for innovation and the meta to shift, and it constantly shifts around. I feel like right now, I don't think we're going to see a solved meta, at least until something else happens that shifts it, like forcefully. But right now, I don't really feel like we're at a solid meta. Gil's a good deck. He's probably one of the better ones, but he's not like the best deck per se. And I don't think Time Spinning Witch is the best deck either. It's just a very good deck that can do very well.
And I think obviously the reason that Chimimi has shown so much support is that people are like Gil and TSW are like here. Chimimi is just like here above them, but against everything else, we have no idea how it goes. Like
yeah, I really enjoy piloting Chimimi. It's a very different experience from the other rulers, I would say. There's not really another ruler that does a good job in the mid range like Chimimi does.
Yep, I've had a lot of good moments with Chimimi. I was actually teaching Scott from the Deepwood team how to play my Chimimi deck. Mine was very like harder mid range. Mine was running like Winds of Salvation in it, like just trying to do less of that. I didn't play any Winds of Vitality or anything, although it's a good choice. Seeing the aggro players playing it was cool, but he and I were playing it, and I was like, all right, we hit this stone. This is a new line of play that just opened up, but this one was the one we had at the beginning of the turn. We could still do that, but now we've got this branch, and things would just branch out further and further, and as you went towards the late game, you're like, all right, we're kind of on the ropes here. What can we dig for? So we just knock out Spirit Stones, dig into a Lorite, prevent lethal from a Scarlet, and then just swing game. So every so often you just get like these weird like plays that come out of nowhere, and there's a lot of hype with it. Like it feels like every game.
It's got a lot of adaptability. I feel like there's obviously bad matchups, but I feel like it's a very flexible deck, and that doesn't necessarily make it the best deck. But I think that's why we saw so many Chimimi players playing it, because it's a lot more easy to adapt to situations. There's nothing better than seeing a discard player try to go through your hand. You're like, okay, I'll just take 3 more cards for free. That's okay.
Because there's a lot of what's the word for it? The decks are like beyond consistent. Like everybody's playing like anybody who's playing single color decks or decks that mana fix. I'm talking mainly, obviously Gil and Time Spinning Witch, Chimimi, the Keurig deck. All those decks are beyond consistent, but the way that the decks are formed and the way that the draws work and the way that the stone system works with the current stones we have, every game feels different. And
I think the biggest thing is that deck construction can vary so much of these decks. They can all do the same thing but be built so differently, right?
Exactly. Like it's such a difference between like I've been trying to experiment with Hanzo because I'm like he does what Chimimi does, but you don't get the elephants, but you can recycle Forest Meditation, so you're drawing 6 for free.
And you stop your opponent from using Forest Meditation is another important thing.
That's actually
I guess
really big.
That's actually another good point. I didn't really brush on that when we were talking about Rachel, but like the Viola. she could banish the spirit stones. So it makes it so you basically shut it off through meditation if they're not going to want to lose their stones.
Exactly. There's so much counterplay involved in every single matchup, unless you're like a balls to the wall swarm deck facing TSW, where you're just like, oh, whoops. Especially non-green versions.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, again, just a little bit of green seemed to be the right spot, or in the case of some decks, mono green entirely. But
I feel like if we start seeing, I know we're not getting true duels again, but if we happen to get something along the lines of like, you know, like a counter stone, a pay stone, anything like that, that lets you kind of start mana fixing, I think we definitely will see TSW start losing a little bit of traction because Lorite will be becoming more popular, but we'll probably see even more deck consistencies coming out just because.
I don't necessarily think Lorite is the end-all be-all for TSW. I think it is pretty important, but for example, if you Lorite a Moza, they still have a 1500 attacker. Right? That doesn't.
Forget about Moza. Forget everything you know about Mosasaurus. It's all the distortion of time.
No, like obviously, Lorite's good against dispersion time, but you get what I'm saying. It's not a silver bullet.
Yeah,
it doesn't end the game for you or anything like that. It just makes it a more favorable matchup.
It makes it so that if you're not playing green, you don't lose.
Whereas if they're playing Lorites, you're obviously going to be a little bit more conservative when you're going for those distortion times and things like that, right? But it does still buy you time because if they're being more conservative, they're not trying to shut you down immediately just because you have that one green up. Unless they have a fair spell or something, they're not able to interact with that. So it's pretty solid. Lorite is definitely a big stay in this format, and the Disciples kind of just complement that so much. Like, I think new people were talking about the Disciples a lot before the rotation, but man, until I played that Jimmy deck, I had no idea how good the Disciples were.
Yeah, I was actually very surprised with how good they were, because I wasn't a huge believer in the Disciples when they first came out, especially because it was during, you know, obviously that format. We had the dual stones, we had other 3-drops that were vying for attention, but after playing them and after seeing the fact that drawing Lorite means that you're kind of playing conservatively to see if you can find the best use for it. If you draw Disciples while you have Lorite in hand,
you just throw that Lorite down. You're like, I'm going for it.
Like, your opponent's like, I gotta play around the Lorite, and you're like, I'll play the Lorite at the end of your turn. And they're like, okay, he used the Lorite. Disciples gain 7 effects. He used the Lorite.
Mm-hmm. Like it's really game shaping, especially against the aggro decks, because the drain swiftness is it's crazy. You could be like up 2,000 life just because the one turn you played the Disciple and then it stayed on the board and they couldn't get rid of it, and now it's deciding the entire game for you because it's first striking all their creatures, it's healing you, it's unable to be removed on their turn. Like it's insane. Yep. Especially get 2 of them, it's basically game over.
That's why a lot of people are playing the Elemental Blasts.
Yeah, pretty good just to blast it before it gets the ability to get barriers. So
yep.
Ironically, it's also really good to Lorite it. So
yeah, hey.
Which sets you up for your own Disciples. So
yep. All right. Well, I think we've exhausted about everything. It's getting pretty late.
Think so.
Dylan, thank you for joining me on Two Dudes Talking. Unfortunately, Colin could not be with us tonight. Could have been 3 dudes talking, but
it's what it is, you know.
Shame. He'll be editing this later, so Colin, if you're editing this,
we'll get back at him. We'll make him edit. So
yeah. Colin, when you're editing this, put like a little, like a smiley face right up there, and then replace it with Dylan's face, and then put Valentina in there. Put Dylan's face on the Valentina.
No.
And then we're perfect.
Unless it's Valentina as Priscia, and then that's fine. That's okay.
I'm talking 2.0.
No, garbage. Get that out of here.
All right, Colin, I'm relying on you to do it because I'm sending you the video.